Hello everybody and welcome to my tutorial. Today I'm going to talk about how to create realistic looking gumdrops inside of Cinema 4D and Octane Render. Now the type of gumdrops that we're going to be making and what they're going to look like is something very similar to this image right here that I created for my daily render series. If you're interested in checking that out, feel free to head over to Instagram and go to Epic J Creations, and that is my name, so you can follow me if you'd like, and you can take a look more closely at these gumdrops that we're going to be learning how to make today. Now, the first thing we need to do when we're making gumdrops like these is we need to look at some reference imagery. And here we go. Here are some nice looking reference images here. And these are kind of similar to what we're going to go for. So to begin, let's start by spline modeling our object. I have this very handy spreadsheet here that I'm going to follow through step by step so I don't get off track, because I tend to ramble sometimes. So to begin, let's start by spline modeling our shape for our gumdrop. I like to press the middle mouse button and go into the front view right here, and then just position the camera nicely around here. Let's go up and grab our pen tool, and then let's click once here, and then let's click once right here, and then I think maybe once right here, here, and then here. Now I have a very hard edge going on here, so what I want to do is change my type from Brazier to B-spline. See how this is much more smoothed out? And now we can start grabbing these points and rearranging them. Isn't this very nice? I love the spline tools inside of R18, very handy. Now that we have this basic rough shape, now we're just going to do half the gumdrop because we're going to lathe it later on and sweep around that whole thing there. Let's first, though, select this top point here, and let's press E so we can break that spline tool because we're basically done. Let's select our top point and take our position on X right here, right down here, take position X and punch in 0, press Enter. Select this bottom piece and our X position 0, press Enter. And then let's take our Y position on the bottom one and set this to 0 as well so we know it's perfectly flat on the ground for us. Let's also take this one here and 0 out its Y height. And now we can just slightly kind of rearrange and figure out how we want the edges of our gumdrop to be. A little less hard-edged, I'm kind of feeling. Something a little bit more kind of smoother like that. And I'm thinking a little taller. Yeah, a little bit. I kind of want to raise it up a little bit more. There we go. And reposition this out a bit. And I'm feeling pretty good with that. I might pull this bottom one in just a little bit. Maybe out a little. And let's just raise this one up. Maybe down. This is just kind of fiddling, just getting that right shape. This will be good enough for now. Now that this is done, the next up thing we need to do is we need to add our lathe object. Let's middle mouse click and go back to our perspective view. And now let's select up here and let's go to lathe and let's make a lathe object and drag our spline underneath the lathe object. Now what we need to do is we need to check our subdivisions on our object. Now we can do this by either doing N plus B, or we can just go to Display and then go Road Shading. Now that we've done that, I can tell we do not have enough subdivisions going on for our gumdrop. So let's select our lathe and increase our subdivision count up to something around 65, I think. That should be good enough, nothing higher than that. Next, let's select our spline and change our interpreting points to uniform and crank that number up to maybe 10. Actually, I think the default 8 should be fine. Let's not go any higher than that. Now, let's hop back into that front view, and I don't like this point here. So let's grab this point and bring it down a little bit. There we go. I like that much better. About right here. The middle mouse click, go back into here. And the next up thing we need to do is name our gumdrop. So let's just call this Gumdrop. I probably spelled that wrong, but let's just call this one plain Gumdrop. And now let's left control, copy this, turn it off, and then hide it. And now what we're going to do is select this top one, press C on the keyboard to make it editable, and now we have our gumdrop now editable and selected. And what we need to do is we need to close this hole that is on the very top of it. Now we're going to start clipping, so we need to do the keyboard shortcut Control plus D and then change our view clipping to tiny. And now we can get in really close and we can close this issue right here. Let's get in a little closer, right about there. And we're still going to have some trouble seeing it, but we're going to go to our live selection tool, turn off show visible elements, select that point, right click and do weld, and then just click right there and that'll close that hole. I know it doesn't look like much has changed, but this is very important to make sure that our textures render correctly inside of Octane. Now let's head to the bottom one and do the exact same thing. Select all these points. This one you can see, and let's weld that point there as well. And now we have our object completely sealed. Let's press E on the keyboard, and now let's move off to deforming it. Let's give some variation in the shape for this object. We can head back to model mode now, and we can just press NA to move back to the default kind of view for our object. And we can also do Control plus D to take our view clipping and bring that back up to medium. So now we have a nice kind of view going on there. Now that we've done that, let's select our new gumdrop. Head over here into the Deformers tab and hold down left shift when we select our displacer, and it'll make a little child underneath of it. So when we go to our displacer, then click shading, let's add a noise into here. Let's click noise right there, and here we go. We can see we have some displacement going on. What we need to do though is select our noise, change its type all the way down to this one, sparse convolution, I believe that's how to pronounce. Probably incorrect on that, but let's increase its scale to 1000%, and then go up one level from our displacer, go over to object, and then increase the scale, or the intensity I should say, to probably around 25, not 250. And we're kind of displacing it, not too bad. We're looking for something, just some variation in the shape of our gumdrop, which isn't really too bad. Maybe we'll crank this just to 20. Oh, whoops, clicked the wrong button there. Let's set this to a value of possibly 20. And that's not too bad. We'll leave this one there for now. First step, though, is now it is a good point to start saving our project. So let's go to File, and then Save. And I'm going to save this in my Daily Renders folder, which now I'm currently at. Right-click, New Folder, and save this wherever you'd like, but this is Daily 283, so you're getting some behind the scenes of my folder structure for my dailies here. We're going to open this up, paste that new daily number in, Daily 283, or whichever years is set. I copied that before I came in, and we'll save. So now we have our daily saved, and let's just title this, I believe we're going to make this a red gumdrop, red gumdrop, and then space 1, because we're having multiple versions. Right now, let's go ahead and do that. Let's hold down left control, or actually, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that yet. Now that we've done all this, we have our displacer going up. It is now time to open up Octane and start texturing this. So let's go ahead and select Octane Live Viewer, and we now have it here. What I'm going to do, though, is my personal favorite way of docking this, is grabbing this little thing up here and dragging it over to the left. And you see, if we go too far right, it pops this little line down here. We don't want that. We want it just so it is right between here and here. So till it looks just like this, then release, and we now have Octane docked in half of our window view right here. I also don't like these lines displayed up here, so what I'm going to do is set this in my rendering settings to a square 1x1, and I'm going to lock my ratio and set my resolution to 600. This is so when I start Octane, I can lock that resolution and keep the proper 1x1 proportions for my Instagram render. Feel free, though, to set that to whatever you'd like. Now that we have that done, we need to make sure that we have something that we can actually see in our scene to actually render object. Because if I hit render right now, I'm not going to see anything. Now, you might be seeing something right now, and that's because inside of your Octane tab, if you go here and you go to Settings, and then you click on Environment, by default, your environment color is going to be like a 50% gray, which, if I hit render, will show you something. I recommend turning this off to black, so we don't actually have any of that environment color coming in on our object. Instead, let's click on Objects and create Hdri Environment. Now that we have that, let's select our Hdri Environment tag, go in one level on our image texture, and then for me, I'm going to go to my content browser, go to Presets. I have the CV HDRIs pack from Cineversity. So I'm just going to go into that, go to Textures, and I'm going to grab, I'm going to zoom it in a little bit, I'm going to grab this very nice render, HDRI. This one right here, I believe, is a very nice one with a good sunset. And not particularly one with a good sunset, actually, but it is a pretty nice one. And now let's just create a plane so we can have that underneath of it and scale it up. Now that we have all this going, we have our gumdrop kind of sitting there. It looks pretty bad so far, but wait till we get it textured and it'll look pretty nice. Now that we have this set, let's click our little lock here so we can also force that to proportion. So we have that kind of going nice there. Move this over and scale it up. And now we can begin texturing our gumdrop. First thing we're going to need to do is go to Materials and then do Octane Specular Material because this is a transparent object. Let's grab this specular material and drag it onto our object. And now let's go into object mode. Now you may notice an issue. Look at this kind of internal weird shape. This is something you may have bumped into before but weren't sure how to fix. And this is basically the problem that is happening right now is when we created our gumdrop with the lathe object, it has the normals inverted on it. To help explain what's happening, let's select our gumdrop, go to polygon mode, and then do Control+A. See how these are blue? That means they're facing the wrong direction. All we have to do is right-click and do Reverse Normals. Now, instantly, you can see they've lit up yellow, and the problem has been fixed, and it's shading much more correctly with this specular texture here. Now let's head back to object mode, and now we can begin texturing our object. First things first, let's open up this material and go to the node editor. Now this may be a little scary if this is your first time in here, but don't worry, it's going to be very easy and you'll be surprised at how nice and handy this is. The first thing we need to do is middle mouse click to navigate around, and I'm going to create a scattering medium. Here we go, a scattering medium, drag that right there. And then we're going to go to float texture. Here it is. I'm trying to find those. They are a little tricky. Grab that one in there. And then Rgb Spectrum. We're going to take our Rgb Spectrum and plug that into Absorption. And then we're going to take our float texture and plug that into Scattering. Now, by default, take our float texture and grab this to 0. We're not going to have any scattering yet. Let's take the whole thing now and plug that in to Medium. Now, instantly, it looks really, really dark, and that's because we need to pull back our density. Before we do that, though, I am going to take our volume step and bring that down to 0.5. This is how accurate the calculations are. Now, we can move this over a little bit to give ourselves some space. Here we go, just a little bit of space there. We can pull this back to something around here. We'll say maybe a level I found, believe it or not, I have this pre-written down, is a density level of 1. But if you're doing this yourself for the first time, you're not going to have all this stuff pre-written down. So here is, in my opinion, a really good workflow for working with subsurface scattering materials like we are right now in Octane. First off, pick the color you would like it to be. I would love it to be just 100% pure red. Now, we can adjust how dense we'd like that to be. So we can pull it up or we can pull it down. And actually, a level of 1 looks about right. I know from experience from past doing this that this will turn out pretty nice here. Now, let's go into our float texture, and now let's bring up our scattering. I have these numbers pre-written down. So let's see, it says right here, we should have our medium density at 1. That is good. Volume 7.5. Scattering at 0.4. So we're going to just type in 0.4. And instantly, we're getting some scattering going on here. Now, this doesn't look very gumdroppy and it doesn't look right. And that is because we are using the direct lighting renderer inside of Octane. We need to click on this and change it to PT or path tracing. And instantly, we have something that looks much better. If we're using the direct lighting, we're just getting a calculation that's close to what it is. It's getting a variation of it or a guess. It's closest guess. The path tracing, though, is a true calculation, and I highly recommend using it if you are ever using any subsurface scattering inside of Octane. Now that we've done that, though, let's click into our render settings. Hop over to kernels, and let's change some settings in here to make this look a little nicer. First off, max samples, let's set this to 800, so we just have something a little easier. We can leave the diffuse step and the specular depth at 16. It's running fast enough for me. But let's take our GI clamp and set that to something like 0.3. And next, let's go over to our camera imager and set our response. Instead of this one here, let's go all the way down to the bottom of the list and select linear and then take our gamma to 2.2. We now have a much flatter image that's much better to work with inside of Photoshop or color grading in post, whichever application you'd like to use. Now that we've done that, let's also check on natural response, head back to our kernels, and we are good to go. Now we have all this set up, we need to finish up a few more things for this texture. So let's just read through the list from the top to the bottom. We're going to select our material. We're going to roughness. I found a value of 0.5 to be pretty nice. Type that in, and this pops up a little bit. We'll just take that down. Next, our index, we're going to go right here, is going to be 1.333. This is the index of water, exactly. So I like that extra 0.33 at the end there. Next up is under our medium node, and our medium density is already set. Our volume step is 0.5. Our scattering right here, under our scattering node, our float texture here that's plugged into scattering is at 0.4. And now there is one final step that we need to do, believe it or not, to finish this gumdrop looking texture up, and that is to select our object and go under, believe it or not, fake shadows, and that is located right here. And by turning this on, in my opinion, it gives a much more gumdroppy looking, kind of food looking object. I'm not sure why this is, but it just happens to look better, and I'm just more of a fan of that look. So if you do like this though, feel free to keep it on. If you don't, definitely turn it off, but for me, I prefer to have this on. It just makes it a little bit brighter. Now that we have all that done, let's close this, double click our texture, and name this red. Now we have that color done. Let's grab red, and it's already applied to our gumdrop, but let's take this whole thing here now, and let's finish it up. By now, according to the list, let's take a look. We need to now model our sugar. We need sugar to coat this object as shown here in this daily image. We have sugar all over our object. This is what gives it this sugary look, makes it look very delicious looking. So to do this, all we have to do, believe it or not, that sugar that I modeled there is extremely simple, but very small, and then cloned all over the surface. So let's turn off our Octane render for now, and give ourselves some space just by cranking that over. And now, let's turn off this object just by hiding it, and let's start modeling our sugar. Let's make a cube. Press E, and we're just going to pull it up off the floor right there so we can see it. And let's begin by scaling it down. We may actually turn this back on just for scale. Yeah, we can model it above it. Yeah, here's about right. And I happen to know that a good size that we can type in right here is, or we can just press T. We want to scale our object down until this size meter here is something close to 3. So 3.3, 3.5. Very good size right there. Now what we're going to do, believe it or not, is select our cube, press C to go to editable, and then we're going to press KL on our keyboard, and we're going to make a cut randomly somewhere in the middle. And this is our basic shape to start making our sugar cubes. We can now press Escape to lock in that cut, and now let's select point mode, press spacebar to go to our object selector there, and now make sure to check on only select visible elements. Now, let's just select some points, pull this down, pull this over. We could hop into polygon mode also, select some points here, crank this down, maybe move this over, and just get a very random looking shape. Let's go back to point mode, go to here, bring this over, bring this down. Let's bring this point here, and this is just some very simple modeling going on here, nothing too crazy. Just kind of play around and have fun. Something that looks very kind of sugary-like, something very random. And sugar is very kind of sharp-edged, especially crystallized sugar that would be on the surface. And just something that just really is very kind of chunky and rock-like. And we already have something that I actually like pretty much here for the top. We just need to change the bottom a little bit. I'm going to bring this over and bring that down. And I can select this, and we can bring this over here, and take this one, bring it down, and we can bring this one down. There we go. Very nice, very random looking, kind of organic looking shape. Let's select the whole thing, go back to object mode, and copy it. Let's move it up, and let's make a different variation. I'm going to have 4 different variations, but we're going to do this really quick. So let's pull this one up, pull this one over, and go ahead and have fun with this. Just do something really random. I selected 2 points there, so I'm just press T, scale that down. Just feel free to do something really crazy and just have fun on this here. Don't have to be too worried about any rules or anything like that. We'll get that point selected there, and get that selected there, and pull that over there. That's already pretty different looking. Go to object mode again, copy. This is version 3 now. Go to point mode, select this point, pull them up, press T, scale them down. Go to polygon mode and select this polygon here, press T, scale it down, press E. Sorry about that noise, my dog's drinking in the background. Grab this, pull it up, and we do not want to add any more polygons to these. We do want to keep them pretty low poly, and grab this one, point mode, grab a point, pull it out, pull it over, Control-Shift-Z. I'm moving my camera out of sight there. There we go. Now grab this one, pull it up, and grab that one and pull it down. Oh, Control-S to save. We do want to do that. And is another added measure I highly recommend, File, Save Incremental. Now, if our computer would crash and corrupt our file, we have that other back one that will not be corrupted. That happened to me in this exact one of these renders, I lost it and had to make it twice because of that. So, highly recommend taking that extra step of security. Now that we have these sugar cubes, let's just copy them and make one more. Sorry for slowing us down. I'll do this one really quick, but feel free to pause this and model your own sugar. You don't have to be modeling as fast as me. And in fact, I encourage you to model something much nicer than what I'm doing right here. That's just pretty messy and quick. But feel free and get some very interesting looking shapes going on there. Sorry about that background noise. And now let's bring that down. There we go. Nice. Control-S to save. Press E. And now we have our nice 4 different looking cubes of sugar. Now, the next step is we need to use Octane Scatter to clone all of these sugars over the surface of our object. To do this, we're going to go to Objects, Octane Scatter. We're going to save. And now we're going to take all of these and drag them underneath Octane Scatter. Then select our Octane Scatter and drag our red Gumdrop 1 into the surface. Now what's going to happen by default, if we go and click Render here in Octane, you can see that it's cloning them on it. And we're going to move this over a bit, but it is cloning them onto each polygon vertex, not what we want. Let's change our distribution from vertex to surface. Now it is cloning them randomly all over the surface of our object. What we need to do next is increase our count for 1, and I have it written down that I found a value of 15,000 is a good number for an object this size, and I also found that we want to have our keep away set to a value of 3. This means objects will not be intersecting themselves, and they'll keep away 3 units from neighboring little pieces of sugar here. The next thing we need to do now is make these a little bit more random. Instead of having all of our sugars face the same exact direction, let's have them all go in a random direction. To do this, we can actually literally go to MoGraph, Effectors, and Random Effector, and we can select Octane Scatter, go to Effectors, and actually use MoGraph Effectors in our Octane Scatter. Now, by default, if we select our random effector, we can see the position is on, and we're going to uncheck that. Instead, we want to set rotation. Now that we have that set, let's just type in 360 for every single position, and we have massively randomized these pieces of sugar that are lying on the surface of our object. I also think that these are probably pretty good. Let's also take our scale and make it something around in each one 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1, just to add that extra level of variation for our object here. Next up is texturing the sugar, because right now it looks more like salt by the default kind of blank texture that's on it that Octane has. So first thing first, let's go to Materials, Octane Specular Material, and let's double click it once Octane creates that and loads it, and let's just name this sugar. I think that's how you pronounce it, or how you say it, or spell it, I should say. And now we have our name. Let us drag the sugar into each of our objects here. Every single one of them now will have a material on it. So now we have a nice specular material. And this looks like a very clear looking material. It's not too bad. But let's hop into the node editor again. Don't worry, this will be very simple work that we're going to be doing in here. Let's pull this over a bit. Give ourselves some space, and what we need to do now, let's take a look here to give ourselves an idea what we're looking at. We can grab our render region too, because we're not seeing all that, to increase our update time. And now, what we're going to do inside here for this particular material, I have it written down. And this is an interesting little trick that I found. For one, we're actually going to grab a random color node, and this is pretty crazy. We're going to take this random color node, and we're going to plug this into a gradient, and that is right here. And our gradient, once we plug it into the input, is running a black and white value, and we can plug that into our reflection. This means we're going to be pumping a completely separate black and white value for our, not reflection, for our roughness, a completely different roughness value for our sugar cubes on each individual object. That means every single one of our sugar is going to be slightly more or less rough on the surface. This adds massive amounts of variation that you can already kind of see going on there. This adds a lot of realism to the scene. Next up, we have random color gradient roughness check. Next up on the list, believe it or not, we also want to have fake shadows checked on. This makes them much just brighter and more lifelike and just much more more sparkly, kind of like what I was going for. Not sure why this works, but it definitely seems to help a lot. Next up, once we've done that, we need to take our index. This is a massive, massive big one. I looked it up and I found out that the index for like a crystallized diamond-looking kind of sugary stuff like this is exactly 2.417 is the exact index. And this just makes it get even more sparkly and pop that much more. We'll do Control S to save, File, Save Incremental. And next up is our scattering medium. So we're going to do that same thing again. Scattering medium here, plug that into our medium. We're going to grab a float value down here, and again another Rgb spectrum. Plug in that Rgb spectrum into absorption, set the value to 100%, so basically we're not getting any absorption, and then take our float and plug that into scattering. And the density, we're going to select our node, and the density that we want to use is actually, I wrote down 15, and then the volume step is 0.5. Now that we've done that, we're going to set our float texture to a scattering of 0.1. So we don't want too much scattering going on, actually. We want it pretty clear. I found that the sugar on there has some variations of clear and unclear. So the ones that are pretty clear are nice to have, just to allow some light to get through that. Now that we've done that, we are actually also going to go to Rgb Spectrum, and we are going to have some absorption distance on that. We could have a level of 0.5. I particularly am not a massive fan of that, but we could keep it if you'd like. I think we'll try it here, which is a little bit of absorption kind of dipping down, but for now this is good. We'll leave that at that. Next up on the list, really at this point, we are pretty much done. This is actually really close to the finished object. Now, let's close this here and turn off this right here and back out. And we can see from a distance, we have a very nice looking candy right here. Now, what I would personally like to do with this candy is maybe lower its scale a little bit. So let's select all these objects, press T, and bring them down maybe to 90% smaller. Feel free to get this to whatever you would like. Feel free to scale them up if you would like. Feel free to scale them down. This is all personal taste at this point. But try and find a level where the sugar feels just about right. And I'm thinking this is it. This isn't too bad. I kind of like that. That's not bad at all. So now what we can do, then now that we have this done, and I feel like this object is just slightly bigger. I'm going to take my whole gumdrop and scale them down to increase the density, 90% maybe. Okay, that's better. That's just a little bit more dense. Yep, there we go. So my object is now 328. Rough and average. Now this is, feel free to be very kind of open on what you want to run this at. So definitely there's no locked limit on this here. What I am going to do is I am going to select my object here, go into my HDRI, and trying to find a nicer looking one. Something with a little bit more kind of sunset going. Here we go. This one right here. This one's perfect. Feel free to use whatever one you'd like. But this one just going to add a little bit more life to this object. Now that we have this going on here, though, let us begin by closing down our Octane Scatter, taking our object, moving it up here, selecting our, close it down, red gumdrop and our Octane Scatter, and then doing Alt plus G to group them in a null, and call this red gumdrop 1. Now, we're going to copy the whole thing by doing left control and moving it up. And now, if we open this up, we can grab our red gumdrop, press E, and we can move it around, and we now have a copy. And the scatter automatically counted the new object with our copy of the new Octane Scatter. So it's very smart. So it automatically put our new copied object into the new copied Octane Scatter. Now, you may be tempted to grab the null and actually move that instead, and you can. But when you do that, it's, Okay, you could do that if you wished. It actually has no problems. Maybe if my random effector is down here. I was getting some issues before where the object would actually bounce around very strangely, but it's not. Like it would become delinked. The Octane Scatter would actually be unlinked from it, and you'd have the sparkles sitting off by themselves. But you can do that if you want. It is working for me now, but it may not be working for you later. So I'm just going to undo that, and I recommend leaving everything at 0 and only ever moving the actual object. So this way you can always just type in 0 and bring it back to the original 0 location if you wish. But now that we've done that, though, let's pull this one over. And this one is going to be blue gumdrop. We're actually going to make a blue one. So we're going to undo this, and we're going to type in blue. And this will be blue gumdrop 1.1, or just blue gumdrop 1, I should say. And now let's take our red texture, copy it over. As soon as Octane finishes thinking, there we go. We'll just copy this over, open up our red gumdrop by double-clicking on it. It's just going to take, oh, I didn't double-click. There we go. And now all we have to do, open our node editor, is grab our absorption value, and that's going to be our Rgb spectrum, and set this to just pure blue. Something I found, if you want to use this hue saturation value, I'm using a number of 210 if you'd like to use that there. And if you want to follow along exactly. And now that that's in, we can close this down right here by clicking that and clicking that. I'm going to do Control Save, File, Save Incremental, grab our blue one and replace that over our red. And instantly we now have a very nice blue gumdrop here as well. Let's take the whole setup and copy it one more time, except this time we're going to call this green. And we're going to delete that 0.1 at the end. Press Enter, save again, and take our red color here. Let's open that red one up that we made blue and actually name this corresponding. So let's call this blue. And we can move to our next one now, our new copy, and let's call this one green. So let's type in GREEN. And now we're going to open up our node editor one last time. This is the last time we're going to have to be digging in here, hopefully. Rgb Spectrum, we're going to select that. And now let's select a nice kind of green value. I'm going to use a hue of 115. Yep, 115 is for my hue. There you go. You can write that down. OK on that. Close this one down. Close that one down. And finally, grab our green and put that over top of our green one there. And now let's move him out by selecting him and pulling him over. Now we have all three of our very nice looking gumdrops here. And we are basically done. This is literally it. We now have all the versions. The tutorial at this point is basically over. So thank you guys so much for watching. Now, if you would like to continue following, I am going to, as a bonus, go through and position these and do some minor artistic tweaks to finish it up for my daily render. So if you guys would like to have some behind the scenes more of what it goes into me doing a daily, feel free to keep on watching, and I'm going to keep going on this and getting it finished up. But for those that are basically done and just wanted to know how to make this actual gumdrop shape, this is basically it, and we have that part down and done. But, yep, this looks about pretty right. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful. Definitely leave a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Leave a thumbs down if you found it unhelpful. And definitely leave a comment below if you're having any trouble or if you have any questions. But thank you guys so much. And there we go. So now, for everybody else who's still hanging in, let's go ahead and finish this up right here. So to start, I'm feeling a little bit like the sugars are a little too big. I don't know. I'm just not too sure. We could go into our Octane Scatter for, well, we have our green, our blue, and our red. Let's open up each Octane Scatter. And let's go to distribution here. And let's take our positioning, increase the Y value by, decrease the Y value by like 2. Just so it'll be poking into it a little bit. Does that look good? No, it doesn't really. We're going to pull that back out. We're going to leave that at 0. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, that'll be probably better without. Let's see how this looks up here. Let's take a look. Looking pretty good. They're not bad from a distance. There's just, we could add more detail. I don't know if I like how I modeled these sugars as much, but they do pretty well. In fact, what I say that we need right here, even though I said to put in that value, is I would actually love to go into my Octane Scatter, select all of these, select, oops, all of these, this Octane Scatter. Let's go into each Octane Scatter and select each value so we can, or sorry, select each cube and then scale them all down to about 50%, half their original size, and Control S. And now we're going to have just a ton more of those. Yep, that is much better. Now, go to each Octane Scatter and now increase this to say 20,000 each and 25,000 each. There we go. That's what I like to see. This is much better. Way better detail. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to go into my random effector, and I am going to increase scale by a absolute scale value. So they'll never go too small, and they're only going to go bigger. And we're going to set them to something about 0.5 by 0.5 by 0.5. Or does absolute scale lock them from getting too big? I can't remember which. There we go. This is better. Let's take a look at that. Let's let that render a little bit. Not too bad. Select all our cubes. Oops. What do I do? Select all you. I may not have want to go on that small with them, so press T. And this is just retouching at this point to get, if I have 150%, they are bigger now. Okay, I'm liking this. We'll do Control S. We're getting some very nice looks there. I'm just feeling like there's something I'm missing in my sugar right here. Scattering, medium, 15.5, 95% white, scattering 1. I feel like this sugar is the trickiest part, and it doesn't look bad by any means. From a distance, let's just take a look at all these right here. Let's grab our Octane render and just lock that in, and let's see if we can get something. Let's just focus on this blue one. Just a piece of that blue one. Okay. That's not very bad. The green one is just not coming through as nicely. The blue is coming through nicer. I just don't feel like we are getting as much of a punch with that. We are having a nice roughness value. I think I need to invert this. I think that was it. It's going to change our roughness up. Aha. Okay, that's what it was. I wanted to change that. Whoops. Turn this off. I want to change my gradient, and I just inverted that to give a different value for the roughness. Now there's going to be a little bit more roughness going on, which is going to give us a little bit more sparkle. And we can, if we wanted, like just to show you guys what we could do, we could take a nice cool value of like all red or something and put that on there. And now we have these red absorbing sparkles that are on there that I don't really want to go for. Or we could do yellow. Yellow might be cool, like this kind of yellow candy. That's not coming out so nice. We'll just leave this at a value of 100%. I'm not going to do that 95 that was on there. And that is looking pretty good. The one that concerns me is the green color. It's just not coming out as nice. I did make sure to leave on, if we go to our sugar and go to our fake shadows, they are on. With them off, that looks horrible. Looks very, very bad. So that's definitely why we keep those on. And I'm feeling pretty good. Now, is a sake of variation, I would like to point out, is let's close up all these Octane Scatters. Let's go into open up each gumdrop except for the green one, and we're going to take our blue one, and I'm going to leave the names even though they all say red. They're under a blue null, so we know which one. And let's go to our displacer, go to shading, open up the noise, and change the seed to a random value. We'll just scrub through, set that one to whichever. Hop down to the next one, shading, noise, seed, and we'll scroll it the other way. So now each color has a different shape going on, just something more random and different looking. Is this one even working? Yep, yeah, it's working. Oh, I like that one there. Okay, sweet. So now we have random shapes, random color, random everything's going on. Let us finish this whole thing up and kind of organize these candies out in a nice little row. So, to begin, I'm not going to do anything super crazy like I did with the other one. We can just take all these candies, shrink them all down, and do Control-Shift, press E, left control, and drag over. And now we have another copy of them. Or actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do undo. I'm going to go to MoGraph Cloner, go into my cloner, turn off the Octane render, Control Save, File, Save Incremental, and I'm going to take this cloner and take the clone count from line to Honeycomb array. This is going to look really cool, I think. We're going to take our Honeycomb array, and we're going to take all of our values, our green, blues, and reds, and put them in the cloner. And now Octane is going to freak, because the values are probably pretty high. We do want to make sure we check on render instances, and instantly, whew, we get a much, much better value here. So first off, our Honeycomb is a little messed up. And that is because of, let's turn our cloner off. They should be in the center. So we need to take our Gumdrop here and make sure we zero everything out so they're in the center of their null. And let's hop to the next one down. Take this one here, zero him out to the center of his null. And if you want to know how I'm doing that, I am right-clicking on these points. So see how this is off? I right-click on these little two arrows here, and that will center it out. A little quick tip there. It's super handy. Now that they're all zeroed out, let's close them all up and do a save, turn on our Octane render, and now we have our nice honeycomb pattern going on here. Let's take this cloner, go into transform, and rotate it here on P 90 degrees. And now we have them all kind of nice and layered out like that. Let's take the whole thing, cloner, and rotate it by pressing R on the red, which I think is the H value, 90 degrees, holding left shift to constrain that. And instantly, I'm very interested to see how this looks. We're going to press render, and we have all our nice candies kind of layered out in there. Now, you're noticing we're not getting any Octane Scatter on that, and that is because we need to turn it off and then back on. So open these up, open them all up, and we're going to turn Octane Scatter off, off, and off. Now that it is off, we're going to turn it back on, and back on. And now we will be getting our Octane Scatter on our gummies right here. We should be. We hopefully should be. Are we? We should be. It could be we cannot have rendered instances. Let's take our honeycomb grid and let's just do a 5x5. Save, and let us take render instances and turn it off. I think that is what broke it. I'm fairly certain, actually. Yep, yeah, that is what broke it. Okay, so sadly we cannot do render instances because it will break our gummy, our sprinkles on there. So let's turn Octane Scatter off again on all three of them again. Once more. Sadly that doesn't work. Then turn them all back on. And now instantly we have our nice kind of Octane sprinkles and gummies going on here. So we can't have as many because that was pretty heavy. But we have a nice kind of pattern going on here that looks pretty cool. That doesn't look bad at all from this distance. And this may be what we kind of want to go for. This could be the look that we want to kind of go for right here. This is a pretty nice set of candies. I might want to increase. No, that's not too bad. Let's take our orientation to a Y. Okay, this is their position. Let's keep that on the Z. And I don't know how to change the pattern. Can we take circle? No, let's just do a square. We'll keep it at what it was. Oh, those values disappeared there, or those little sprinkles did. But yeah, this isn't too bad. I'm going to actually Control S and risk it all, probably possibly crashing, and do a 10x10. And see how much it freaks out. Our VRAM is only at 450 right now in Octane, so it's not doing too shabby. Oh yes, I'd love to use this right here if it will allow. It did. It did, even though it is quite heavy. So Octane, do not fail me now. Let us line this up. And let's reposition our camera. We are really close to finishing this up. Let's bring this in over here. And I'm thinking this is going to look really, really nice. Yeah, let's bring that in. Oh yeah, I like this. And what I would like to do is actually turn Octane off for a minute, which will increase our viewport speed a little bit, and let's just pull these over. All right, it's heavy. It's very, very heavy. All those thousands and thousands of clones on there are just super intense. But bring this over a bit more. Come on. Here we go. This is what I'm wanting here. So now what I would like to recommend as a really nice quick tip is let's go to Object, Octane Camera, hop in that camera, and now what we're going to do is middle mouse and then middle mouse the top view, take our display to road shading and our cameras to perspective, and now we can view over here away from our Octane camera that's being controlled, and we can actually turn Octane on. This is really crazy, and we can see through that camera because Octane is set to read through that first camera there. So let's hop into our camera, and I just like to zero everything out and reposition it from scratch right there. So 90 degrees to the right, and then we'll press E. We're going to pull this back. And we'll press E again, or if we don't have to, we can lift it up now. And now we can rotate and bring that down a little bit. And we'll position it up here a little bit. Bring it forward, bring it down. Select our camera now. I highly recommend going to Object and changing your focal length to something other than 36 in the default. I prefer 50 because this is what the human eye sees in real life, but feel free to change that whatever you'd like, but something, unless you have a good reason for keeping it at 36, change that up just to give a little bit of variation to your shot. Just add some more life to that. Now that we've done all that, let's select our floor plane right here, and let's press T and scale that way up. We need this like much, much bigger. So we're just going to get that a lot bigger to kind of cover that horizon line. And let's save, file, save incremental. And this isn't looking too bad. We have our nice gummies there. We have that distance shot. We can actually middle mouse click, hop back into this camera. And actually, I'm just going to hop into this one here. Sorry for jumping around. Press E. Let's dolly the whole thing in a little bit further. A little bit more. Yeah, I want just a little bit more. In fact, we could dolly this in a lot. Go to our camera. Instead of a tight angle, we could do a wide angle shot. Possibly not. Set that to 50. Let's do Control S, turn off Octane, hop into our cloner, and pull the whole batch over. Just tighten them up a bit. Click on my computer churn. There we go. This is just tightening up the group of candies a bit more. They're not intersecting though. Turn Octane back on. Now we just get some more candies in the shot here. I think it's going to be nice. And here we go. That's way, way nicer, I think. So let's hop into our camera coordinates. Take our Z value, which it's not showing up on there, so I'm just going to grab it and move it back about yay far, a little bit more maybe, and right click here to zero out this because I don't like this little bit here, and crank this down something similar to this right here. Sorry for that music in the background. It's kicking on, but don't worry about that. And finish up with this very nice, and we'll do 30. There we go. Look at all these nice, beautiful rows of candies. And they're looking pretty sparkly, especially on the blue ones and the red ones. The green ones, not so much. Now they do feel, the blue ones always feel more dense to me personally. So I like to select the blues specifically as opposed to the greens. This is making me hungry looking at these. But I like to go into there, open up my node editor, select my scattering medium, and then actually taking the blue one only as soon as this refreshes here. And the reason Octane's running slow for me is I actually, my computer crashed, the power went out, and Octane was in the middle of a render and something happened to Cinema, and Octane's running, I reinstalled it, And it ran way better once I did that, but my Cinema copy is actually acting really wonky now. So I need to refresh that. So it's actually Cinema's primary reason why it's having some of these freezes. But now that we've done that, let's just select our scattering medium. I like to take the density to maybe about 0.5. And let's see what this looks like for the blue here. So we can close this one. Oh, yeah. See, I like the blues for some reason get darker than the greens. We actually have to have half the density for some reason. I'm not very sure why. But because of that, we are going to have to increase our scattering to maybe 0.5. Just a tiny, tiny bit. Because we did lower that global value, because our scattering medium, our density, is a multiplication of our float in RGB. So our absorption and our scattering are multiplied by the total density. So it's important to set your density first and then jiggle these two between that. Now that this is done, though, I feel pretty happy with this render. So let's close this. Control save. Let's make a clone, or I should say a null right here. And we'll move our null up in the air and pull it over to here. Select our camera, drag our null under the object tab into focal point. Click on our camera imager right there, our little camera tag, and click on autofocus to off and increase our aperture I should say, to 5. Press enter, and now we have some beautiful depth of field kind of going on right there. We might need to crank it more, say 15. There we go. This is really showing it off right there. If I grab a line of this right here, we can see we're getting some very nice looking rendered candies. There we go. Much, much better. Now, to finish everything off, let us decide on what direction we would like the light to hit. Let's select this right here, and we're going to rotate it like the shadows to turn. Oh, whoa, that was way too much. That I do like that kind of hit right there, though. We could have the sun hit directly from in front, which is going to highlight our sugar crystals a bit more, you're going to notice, because the sun is reflecting or refracting that directly back towards us. That said, let us play around. This is what I love about Octane. By reversing it, we're going to highlight from directly behind, so the shadows are going to be shining towards us. And I love this behind highlight we're getting right here. Look at these little candies. This turned out really cool. Maybe we'll bring it. Maybe we'll bring this back around. Set this to 0 again, just to refresh ourselves, and bring it up. So we're going to bring a side highlight. There we go, just a little bit on the rims. We're going to pull it back. And this may be different depending on the HDRI you're using, but maybe bring the shadows towards us a little bit. That's not too bad. Yeah, that's pretty good right there. I like that. And we'll do Control Save, File, Save Incremental one more time. And we're already getting some beautiful looking renders right there. I'm actually going to hop into my Octane camera and disable this null. Because what we can do is we just click focus and we can actually click where we'd like it to be. I'm going to try right here. Yeah, right there on that green one. Or actually, we could pull to this red one right back here. This will look very nice, I think. You get some really nice highlights off of that one. And as a little trick, I'm going to let you know, because the detail on this we built isn't super incredible at real close, and we have a lot of our candies really close right here, by moving them back a little bit, it actually lets our renderer or our audience be tricked in thinking there's more detail in our candies than there really is, because they're only being able to see them at that distance back there. Now, it feels like our sugar is not quite getting rendered correctly, so I want to turn all of our scatterers off. Save real quick. Wait for that to kick in. They did. I'm going to now turn off Octane Render and turn each one back on individually. There we go. They're all back on. Let's hit Render again. It's going to update all that geometry, which is still surprisingly only 578 megabytes. Is incredible how light this is, really. It is heavy in cinema, but as far as Octane is concerned, it's not too bad, which is pretty incredible. And there we go. That helped bring that out. I love the little sugars that are on top of these. I just love those little highlights. And man, we are about done. I'm going to bring this back to 0, I think, because I love that highlight, but just not quite right. I do like that forward facing sun. So I'm going to leave this at 0, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save. I'm going to unselect all my objects, go to Object, Octane Targeted Area Light. It's going to create a new light, and it is going to think about it for 1 minute. And we're going to back up. I'm going to save, press E, pull it up in the air, and go back. And this light is going to hopefully be a very good specular highlight for our candies. I'm going to bring it right back. Yes, perfect. Here we go. And this is going to really punch in some light on those. And I'm going to get in a studio setting, go up. I'm going to select that and turn off Normalize. This should darken that substantially. It did. It did pretty decently. And finally bring our power down to maybe 75. I think that should be a good number. We're off the beaten trail at this point, but we are just finishing everything up, making it look pretty. And I'm going to pull this aside. Very nice. Very nice. Just some rim lighting going on. Kind of warm. And in fact, let's warm this up even more. Let's go, say, 4,500. So we're going to get some just kind of nice warm light hitting these candies. Just something maybe like afternoon sun maybe. And you can see it got much darker, so we need to increase our power now to say 150. This is what Normalize would technically fix. So we can turn our Normalize back on. So it's going to stay the constant normal correct power no matter what our temperature is. So we could bring this down to maybe 100 or in fact, I think we're going to need to bring it down to maybe 75. Let's see how quick that updates. That might take some time. Okay, that's still not enough. Set this to 50. We are hitting pretty hard with this stuff, even Octane. It is doing this remarkably quick considering we are cloning 25,000 little objects with subsurface scattering on each individual object in here. This is millions of objects. Like, I can't even... How many meshes? 620,000 objects with subsurface scattering going on right now. This just looks really cool. I think that's just beautiful. Let us bring our power back to, say, 25, just a little bit less. Even a little bit less, even more. I'm thinking, okay, maybe 10. I want that rim light in the reflections, but I do not want so much intense light going on. I could turn off surface illumination, which means it'll only be showing up in the reflections, which is, we'll turn this one back on a little bit. There we go. We have these little bit of highlights. We're not going to go too crazy. That'll be good enough to keep it a little bit warm, and I might bring this to 15. Now we're going to save, and the final thing I want to do is I want to reduce this amount of depth of field because we got way too much going on. Let's bring that 15 down to, say, 10. And don't mind that music playing there. Bring that back. It's a pretty nice value. These candies are looking good. I like that. I like that. I think Octane camera coordinates, crank it down maybe to 31. Okay, there we go. Now, take our focus point and I'm thinking, well, it could probably stay. We may not need to move that. Let's take a look. Which one are we focusing on? Can I reselect that red one there? Okay, we're going back a little bit. I want to bring it forward. There we go. A little forward more. There we are. Let's focus right there. Let that render. And what we can do is grab our render region and just crank that on something like right here. And we can very quickly, you see, churn out a really high quality version of that to see how this is looking. Love it, how it is looking on the blue one. The green ones are the ones I'm concerned about, though. And in post with color correction, this still can look really, really nice. Yeah, that's not bad. That's pretty good. As a last minute note, I know this is probably a bad time to be doing this. Let's turn off our Octane render. Let's select all our little scatter cubes. And this is what I do. I'll tweak and tweak for hours and hours of time. Let's select all our little sugar cubes. and scale them up. I'm first going to turn off that cloner too because I just crashed my system. Scale them up 150%. 150%. Zoom into here, turn Octane back on, hop back into here, and take a look how those look. Let's hop out of this camera, zoom in, and it is looking gray, but that's because we have all those colors smashed in on each other. So I'm just looking how this sugar looks in general. I may take our random effector down here and go to parameter and take our scale and zero that out and see what that does for us. Okay, that's not bad. Let's do 0.1 by 0.1. Not a full level of 1 there. Say 0.1. There we go. There we go. Okay, now we just have that little bit more. You know what? Let's bring it down for the rest of minus 0.1 by minus 0.1 by minus 0.1. And this is just me tweaking and tweaking these last little bits. Okay, that is what I like. Now we can turn off our Octane render, re-save, close all these back down, save one more time, file, save incremental, I am paranoid on that, and turn back on our cloner. And we will wait for that to kick in. It does. Save one more time and hit render on Octane, and let us take a look at our new scene, which should look pretty dang nice. Oops, forgot to hop in the camera. Let's hop in, do that right now. Is it going to go? Oh, I didn't click it. There we go. Oops, I did. Let's hop back in. There's our camera view. We are in it, and we are taking a look at our scene. And our sugar should look a little bit more, just more pronounced right now. Yep, we're just going to see more of it, which, yep, yeah, that's just much, much better in my opinion, especially on the green one, which was having problems. But this is all up to personal opinion, of course, so feel free. Oh, yeah, I like that much, much better. This is far better. So let us call that done. Let's call this one good and end the tutorial. So my render settings I like to use to finish everything up. Let's save this. Or cancel that. I like to use 1080 because it's equivalent to 1980p render, except we're just doing a square. So we have the height, but we're not doing that width. And then we're going to go into our render and do C4D Octane render, or just plain Octane render. And we are good. Current frame is fine. We're going to hop into our Octane settings quick and just set this to 16:123 because it is a still. Control S to save, just so we have that. I'm also going to make sure to click on my preset, which will just set everything else up I like to use ahead of time just because I'm paranoid. It's everything that I already showed you guys, so there shouldn't be anything different, but I just set that anyway because I'm paranoid. And now that we have all that done, Control S to save, file, save incremental one more time. And now we are ready to click Render to Picture Viewer and finish up the daily, whatever number we're on at now. At this point, I forget. But thank you guys. We're on daily, which number? 283. So today is daily 283 that you guys have just watched. We have just learned how to make these candies right here. Thank you guys so much for sitting through all that and hanging in with me going through all that. You'll notice that our render doesn't have the very white looking candies that just kind of pop here, that you don't see as much what's loaded in. But for what we had, it didn't look like that. That all comes down to color correction and really popping that specular, that really specular highlight. They just kind of really want to punch a bit more. That it does really add a nice look to these candies here. It is pretty nice. It also has to do with how you modeled those little candies there as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful, and you may notice that we have the candies a little flatter here than the other one, but that's all personal taste, how you want them to be. But thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. I say that a lot, but if you have any questions in the future about help or tips, or preferably too, if you have any idea on how to improve on this and take this another step and make them look even better, please feel free to mention that in the comments below. I love hearing about that. If you get stuck on anything or having any problems, let me know. I love helping people out and getting things figured out. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.